everyone. We are here today with our webinar, Rural is Now. It's going to be a candid conversation with father of rural marketing, Mr. Pradeep Kashyap. Before I move into the webinar, let me introduce you to the IIHMR University. I am Dr. Sheenu Jain. I'm a professor of marketing here. At IIHMR University, we specialize in research, postgraduate education and training in health sector. Over the past 35 years, IIHMR has carved a niche for itself among management institutions, both in India and abroad. We are working in collaboration with a lot of institutions, including Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, USA, World Health Organization, World Bank, United Nations, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We have a lot of programs offered here, which includes MBA in Hospital and Health Management, MBA Pharmaceutical Management, MBA Rural Management. We have over 800 projects that have been carried out in the university, over 400 plus publications, a lot of professional and training programs. In particular, today, with the help of School of Development Studies, we are offering this webinar to you. Some of the thrust areas that has been covered by School of Development Studies, which include water, sanitation and health, internal migration and informal economy, early childhood care and education, agrarian economy, education for sustainable development, just to name a few. These are some of the programs offered and thrust areas offered by the School of Development Studies. Let me introduce you to the theme of this webinar today and what's that we're gonna cover. Well, today we have with us our legendary speaker, Mr. Pradeep Kashyap. So we thought rural is now is the apt theme that we want to talk about. Rural has gone throughout massive structural changes in the last few decades. We witness aspirations of rural consumers. We witness growth in consumer market. We witness growth of agriculture, horticulture, milk, poultry industry. Even during this critical time, we witness tractors, two-wheelers, mandis, kharif fasal, all back on track. The hinterlands in India consist of about 650,000 villages. These villages are inhabited by 850 million consumers, making up for about 70% of population, contributing half of country's GDP. Consumption patterns are changing. Owing to favorable changing trends as well as potential size of market, rural India seems to be a large and attractive opportunity. So today's candid discussion will help you understand the transformation, disruption, and new movements in rural India. We're gonna cover areas of opportunities for youngsters in rural India. Is rural soon going to become the next urban? Myths associated with the rural market, the role of women in rural India in coming times. Is rural needs to be more glamorous for young Indian students who wish to have their career in rural? Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce Pradeep Kashyap, founder and CEO MART. Though sir doesn't need any introduction, he is a visionary leader and his illustrious career and profile is known to all of us. But I would still like to reiterate his profile and talk about it today. He's known as the father of rural India, a title bestowed to him by late Professor C.K. Prahalad. He's a global thought leader and a sought after speaker, having been over 500 talks across the globe, including a 3-time TEDx speaker. He has worked for 20 years with MNCs before starting MART as a business mind social heart consulting organization. He has been marketing advisor to Ministry of Rural Development and served on the Prime Minister Committee and Chief Minister Committee on Rural Development. He's a World Bank and United Nations consultant and member of Advisory Committee of Reserve Bank of India and National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development. He has advised dozens of MNCs such as Pepsi, GE, Philips, Intel, and more. He has authored the most definitive rural marketing book, a standard text at the premier MBA institutions all over the country. He has given talks at Cannes, Lyon, 2008, France, University of Cambridge and London Business School, UK, and University of Illinois, Chicago, USA. He has created the world famous project Shakti, which all of us know, with Hindustan Lever, which has become the case study at Harvard to appoint 60,000 poor women as company dealers. He has pioneered many sustainable business and marketing models, such as inclusive marketing, public-private company partnership, and last mile distribution model with Colgate, Tata Steel, Novartis, etc. Ladies and gentlemen, he has also been awarded with the Lifetime Achievement Award 2013 by Rural Marketing Association of India. So please join your hands together for Mr. Pradeep Kashyap. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us today. I mean, it's really an honor and privilege for me. As I was talking, I have studied your books, I have taught with your books, and today it's a golden opportunity for me to, chat with you and ask you some sort of questions. Well, we would like to start understanding about your, the rural growth story. If, in brief, if in a nutshell, you can tell us about how has been the rural growth story so far.
Thank you very much, Sheenu, for that very long introduction. But while you were introducing me, I thought that, here is a person who's worked for 30 years, 35 years in the rural sector, and he's got enough glamour. So why are you concerned about glamour? Because I've been to Cannes festival where Aishwarya Rai and these kinds of people go there. So what I want to tell the young people is that there is enough and more glamour in this sector today. But I'll, of course, be talking in more detail. What I thought was that all of us love listening to stories. So what I'd like to do is share with the students and others who are attending this webinar the rural growth story, which will be intertwined with my rural story, because in many ways, my destiny is woven completely with the destiny of the Indian rural market. Okay. So till the 80s, there was no rural market. The reason being that whilst 75% of India's population lived in rural India, the rural sector accounted for only 25% of India's GDP. So naturally, if 75% people are contributing only 25%, you can imagine the extent of poverty. So there was no company was looking at the rural market at all, okay? Except for the traditional companies, Unilever and ITC, Eveready, some of these very old established companies. And during the 80s, I was also busy, collecting fat salaries from multinational companies. So I had no knowledge or no interest in rural. Now let's come to the 90s. All of us also, to remember things, we try and put together some sort of a model, okay, and an acronym. So I have what I have conceived recently, the 4 Ds model of rural development. D for Delhi. So what are these 4 Ds? The first D is the decade of denial, which is the 90s. The second decade is the decade of doubt, okay, which is from 2000 to 2010. The third decade is the decade of demand, which is the decade which is just completed 2010 to 2020. And the final decade is the decade of digital and the decade of discovery of the new rural consumer. Okay? So that's what will be the future. So I'll quickly run through the first 3 decades. So in 1991, India liberalized its economy, and the urban market started booming because a lot of foreign goods came into India. Manufacturing of foreign brands started to happen in India. So companies got busy taking advantage of this demand which had come up in the 90s in the urban markets. So there was just no focus on the rural markets. And the other thing also was that the rural market was not easily accessible, because out of the 600,000 villages, not even half, not even 50% had an all-weather road. So you could not reach your products there. And plus the demand was so small that you didn't have a viable business model. So companies didn't look at the rural markets at all because they felt that people don't have enough money to eat. So where will they have money to spend on buying their products? Okay. But during this decade, a couple of important things happened. The first was the Panchayati Raj Amendment, which actually happened in the late 80s when Rajiv Gandhi was the prime minister, but it actually got implemented only in the early 90s. And what was this amendment? That 1/3 of all positions in the panchayat would be reserved for women. Now, initially, the women were actually just angutha chap for their husbands. But slowly, as they started taking control of their functions, they found that they could handle things, and then they actually took over their role very seriously. Okay, so that was the first thing that happened. The second thing, some of your students may know or may not know, that in the 90s, we started the Microfinance Movement, which was based on Grameen Bank model in Bangladesh, for which Professor Mohammed Yunus has got the Nobel Prize. So in India also, we started the microfinance movement with women. And this was driven by NABARD, the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development.
Right.
And in by now, this movement has reached a stage where there are 7 million women's groups, and each having a membership of about 10 to 12 women. So at least 70 million rural women are involved in these groups. And what they do is they start some small business for themselves, and whatever little money they earn, that is spent on the family's health and education. You know, most of the money that men earn goes into buying liquor, but women spend it on this. So these were the two major inputs that came into the sector. Now let's move to the second phase, which is the 2000 to 2011, which I've called the decade of doubt. You know, the women's literacy rate, rural women's literacy rate, went up sharply by 26% between the 2001 and 2011 census. And this happened largely because the literacy mission had come into existence, and rural women started going for night schools and all, because what rural women realized is that the future of their children depends on the quality of education that they get. So we did a study many years back for the World Bank, and we asked rural women in UP in some 1,100 villages that what is the one wish you have for your children? And they said education, and that too English education, because English is the passport to a job. Okay? So women's awareness started going up very sharply, because in one decade, as I said, the literacy levels rose by 26% compared to 8 or 9% in the previous decade. The second was, if you remember, we had the global meltdown in the year 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
And that's a time when, as a safety net, the government of India launched the Employment Guarantee Scheme, NREGA, the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. And 40,000 crores was allocated for that scheme per year. So 40,000 crores came into the rural economy, and especially at the bottom of the pyramid. So some purchasing power came in the hands of the very poor. And that's how, in this decade, you know, companies like Unilever and others started selling their sachets, and Kevin Care was the main leader.
Yeah,
started the whole movement, right? So that's the other thing. The third is NABARD introduced something called the Kisan credit card, because the farmer has no money, so he's always dependent on the Artiya, the middleman, who exploits him. So NABARD wanted to remove this exploitation. So they introduced the Kisan credit card, and the objective was that every farmer, the 110 million farmers that we have in this country, would have a Kisan credit card. Therefore, he could go to any agri-input shop and buy his seeds and fertilizer and pesticides and all. Okay? In addition, he could also, the NABARD also allowed him 20% of the credit limit that was fixed for him, which was based on his landholding and the kind of crop he grew. 20% of that, so most farmers got about 1 lakh or 2 lakh rupees as their credit limit, and 20% of that is about 20,000-30,000. So the farmer ended up buying a durable, mostly a television set. So the television boom actually happened in the second decade, right? And television meant more awareness and more understanding of things outside. This is also the period when Sheenu also mentioned about the pilots. So companies said, okay, we see that there is some demand, so we'll start doing some pilots. So the most famous pilots are Project Shakti of Unilever, which MART implemented, and the other is the E-Chopal model of ITC. Okay? So still they were not going full scale, but they wanted to see, is there a business model? Okay? It was around the same time that I realized that there is going to be a big demand in the coming decade for rural products, from rural consumers and rural markets. So I started meeting directors of many business schools. During that period, I would have met 30, 40 directors. And I suggested to them that they should introduce a course on rural marketing in the MBA program. And most of the directors were not very enthusiastic, but some who were, they said, there is no textbook, so how will we teach? That's how I ended up writing the textbook. I'm not an academic. Incidentally, I'm not even an MBA. I mean, Sheenu is an MBA plus a PhD. So I ended up writing that textbook, which is now used by most institutes. So let's come quickly to the third decade. Sheenu, can you hear me? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I just, because there was no. Yeah. So the third decade is what I've called the decade of demand, where the whole of rural India is moving from poverty to prosperity. And how is that happening? The per capita income has shot up from the previous decade, where it was around 50,000 per capita, has shot up to 50% of the urban income, has shot up to 80% of the urban income. And that 80% rural income is enough to have the same amount of purchasing power as the 100% income of the urban person, simply because drinking water is free in rural India, electricity is free, primary health is free, primary education is free. So actually, the rural person, and some food is also free because he grows it on his own farm. So actually, with that 80% income, he's better off than the urban person with that 100% income. And that's how demand started coming up in rural India. Road connectivity shot up, and from 50% to about 70%, and that covered, 50% to 90%, and that has covered, in terms of demand, it has covered 100% of the demand, because the remaining villages, which are very tiny with populations of less than 200, that means just 40, 50 households, they don't even have a shop in their village. So there is no demand from that. So therefore, as far as corporates are concerned, they now have access to 100% of the rural market. Okay? As Sheenu mentioned, that India became the #1 milk producer in the world. Now, what does this mean for the rural household? There is a myth that income in rural India comes during those two harvests. Okay? That income actually is used for big ticket items, for renovating the house, for a wedding in the family, or for buying high ticket items. Okay? But the extra milk that families in rural India are producing, they're selling that, they're producing, I mean, the cows produce it daily and the house owner sells it daily. So, if you sell 4-5 liters of milk every day, you're getting about 200 rupees coming into the household. So households are actually running on the income from milk and not from the harvest. So therefore, income from milk is a very important component for managing expenses in the rural areas. The other thing which may surprise some of you is that, like the joint family system broke down in urban India about 20 years back, the joint family system in rural India has broken down completely. Except for very remote villages and very poor villages, you go to most villages now and you'll find that you will come across nuclear families. So what that means is the demand for many products has shot up significantly, because earlier, if two sons were living with the father, now the two sons are separated from the father. So both of them need refrigerators and cook stoves and all kinds of things. So suddenly in this decade, a lot of demand has come up because of this uh, breakdown of the uh, joint family system. Okay? Uh, the other thing that has happened is that 70% of all new factories in India have come up in small towns. And you know, there is a relationship between small towns and rural India. So there are 6 lakh villages, habited villages, and about 8,000 towns. So every town has a satellite of about 70, 80 villages. And that's how these factories have come up. So if I take the example of Rudrapur, which is in Uttaranchal, uh, a big industrial estate was set up there by N.D. Tiwari when he was the chief minister. So Tata Nano moved in there, Colgate moved in there, P&G moved in there, and they started manufacturing their goods from this new industrial estate. So a lot of people got jobs in these factories, and these people were the villagers. So they started buying two-wheelers, as I told you that the sales have gone up. So these people started buying those two-wheelers and all. So a new economy got created. Okay? And the last one, which is the present decade, you're going to see digital playing a critical role, because now access has been made possible because road connectivity has been ensured, and companies like Amazon have tied up with India Post for delivery, last mile delivery. Yeah. So the last mile delivery challenge has also been taken care of. Affordability has become less of a critical factor because the incomes have gone up sharply. Right? So now, out of the 900 million population in rural India, about 200 million people have access to internet, whether through their laptops or through mobile phones. And these are the youth, and these are the people who buy products. The children below 15 don't buy anything, or the old people don't buy anything. So actually, this 200 million users are also the people who are the buyers of things or consumers. So they are the ones who are now using, online shopping the way you and I do it. And incidentally, I have a cottage in a village outside Ranikhet in Uttarakhand, and my servant, when we were there, he ordered a mobile phone on the net, which he did all the process himself. He selected the mobile, and he then went and ordered it on Amazon, and it was delivered at our cottage, which is inside a village. So you can imagine, all those challenges have now been taken care of. Also, as you know, that all railway stations are Wi-Fi enabled, and this is for free. So you find in the evenings, many children from schools and colleges in these villages, nearby villages from these railway stations, they land up in the railway station and they use Wi-Fi for free. Yeah? So we are already on a digital explosion, which is going to really create an explosion in demand for all kinds of products. And the BharatNet cable, which will connect all the 2.2 lakh panchayats, 80% of the cable has been laid. I think in another 6 to 8 months, they should complete the project. So you will now find that connectivity in rural homes will become the norm. And the last one is the discovery of the new consumer. So the new consumer is really the young, the youth, both men and women. I told you that women have got empowered because of the Panchayati Raj and because of literacy and the microfinance movement. And these two will be the main buyers, male and female youth. So companies will have to understand their lifestyles, their aspirations, their needs. And also they'll have to look at new price points because they may have to tweak their business model, especially for last mile delivery. And also this KYC, know your customer digital identification, has made it much easier for banks in rural areas to give loans to their individual customers for buying two-wheelers or for other products. So you see that digital is now transforming rural India, and rural India is becoming as well equipped as urban India in terms of infrastructure. All 100% villages have been electrified. Road is now connecting 90% or more villages. Okay? I've told you about digital. So you see that rural India is now becoming comparable to urban India, and with a much better lifestyle because the air is cleaner. There's no noise pollution. Traffic is not a problem. Right? So more and more people will start working from rural, and that's something that I'm sure will come up in the discussion. So thank you very much, Sheenu. Back to you.
Thank you so much. So that's quite interesting. 4Ds that you talked about: decade of denial, decade of doubt, decade of demand, and decade
and now
of
digital
and discovery of new consumers. But sir, interestingly, you also talked about that out of 800 million, currently only out of 200, close to 200 million people have internet connectivity. Right? So, the scenario is definitely changing. We are moving towards digitization. The Facebook or WhatsApp has equally become popular in the rural India today. But how do you see next 5 years changes in the rural India? How do you foresee them?
I think in terms of buying power, rural now has the same kind of buying power. Okay? As I explained to you that because several things are free for them, so actually their disposable surplus is the same or more than an average urban consumer. Right? So they will end up buying what they wish. I think there will be a lot of changes in lifestyle because right now the rural people don't celebrate the way we do in urban areas, say birthday parties. It's catching on, but it's still not the same. I mean, I know that when young people go together walking around in the market, they buy a big bottle of Coke and they ask for paper glasses and they share it. So there's this whole concept of sharing, and because everything is shared in rural India. So I think they will build their story around their traditions. And I hope they do that because I'm really anti this whole, Western models and Western way of living in our country. We have such a rich ancient tradition, and our tradition is really maintained in rural India. All our festivals come from rural India. All our stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata and everything comes from rural India. Urban India is only a bubble. But because we are pen pushers and we have taken control of the whole administration, we think that we rule the country, but actually it is the farmer. Because I'll just take half a minute to tell you that where does all our food come from? From rural India. Where does all our raw material for all our cloth come from? So whether it is cotton, silk, wool, it all comes from rural India. Okay? So, where does all our building material come from? It comes, again, the cement comes from the lime in the mines in rural India, right? So our roti kapda makan comes from rural India, not from the government.
Very true. But very interestingly, if you look at it, especially for the benefits of students, I keep hearing this all the time from them. When you talk about rural means poor, rural means farmer, rural means agriculture, rural means artisans. They talk about, so when you're talking about denial, I feel they say that यहाँ पे कुछ नहीं, कोई नहीं खरीदेगा, नहीं चलेगा. when you're talking about doubt, I think students always have doubt about going into the rural market. So I would also like you to decode certain myths associated with the rural market.
Yes, I'm glad you brought this up at this stage, because then it'll, set the tone for the discussions to follow. The first myth is that the minute you talk rural, people say, oh, agriculture, right? So rural is equal to agriculture. That is the myth. The reality is that agriculture now contributes only 1/3 to the rural GDP, not India's GDP, to the rural GDP. The remaining 2/3 of the rural GDP comes from the manufacturing sector. Yeah, and manufacturing doesn't mean heavy machinery and all. Manufacturing means carpet weaving, handlooms, handicrafts, food processing, a whole lot of other this thing, and the services sector. Okay. So that's the first myth, that rural is equal to agriculture. The second myth is that agriculture is equal to food grain. So we always say, oh, the production of food grain is this year 290 million tons. Sure, it is. But do you know that food grain contributes or accounts for only 1/3 of agriculture?
Okay.
The other 2/3, 1/3 is horticulture. And the last 1/3 is animal husbandry, which is milk production, piggery, fishery, goatery, all those animal-related activities, right? So now, if you have a poor monsoon, it's going to happen during one window of a month or two, during either the summer monsoon or the winter monsoon. And food grain actually accounts for only 1/6 of agriculture. So if you have one poor monsoon, it can only impact 6% of the rural economy. Only. Even if I have a complete drought and I don't have any production of rice, for example, in this year, it can impact the rural economy only by 6%. So the rural economy can only come down by 6% from what it was last year. But it is the sentiment, because traditionally farmers were into only farming. So the minute one crop went, they felt destroyed. Then they felt that, we get only two crops, one is gone, so 50% is gone. Yeah. Okay? So it's like the stock exchange, it works on sentiment. Okay? Nothing changes between today and tomorrow, but the share prices go up or down between today and tomorrow. Why?
Yeah.
Right? So it's just the sentiment, but the reality is that agriculture is now it's the least important sector, because agriculture contributes 30%, manufacturing contributes about 32%, and services contributes the remaining 40% odd. So
that's quite interesting when sir is talking about agriculture only contributes for 30% of the rural economy, while 32% goes to manufacturing and 40% goes to services.
So I hope the students are getting this, that agriculture, because you see, what you feel is that I don't want to go into rural because I don't want to do farming. Yeah, but you're not going to do farming.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So do you want me to run through the other myths, or should we take them as the context comes up?
Sir, as you wish. I mean, if you want to take it at this stage, I'm fine with it.
No, I think let's take it up as it comes, because then the context would be there.
Perfect. So I also wanted to understand, I mean, we all have been hearing about, when we talk about FMCG, Hindustan Unilever names comes into picture, and then Project Shakti is something I think we have been hearing it all through, and you have been instrumental in this particular project. So I would definitely like you to talk a bit about the Project Shakti and the initiatives of Melas that you have taken, especially from the rural marketing perspective.
Yeah, okay. So Project Shakti is Unilever is the deepest penetrated FMCG company in India. Okay? So they had already covered all villages with population of 2,000 plus. Okay? So the bigger villages. These
Right.
add up to about 100,000.
Right.
So through their distribution model, okay, through their distributor and their star sellers, they were making deliveries to these village retail outlets in the 2,000 plus population. But they didn't have a business model below that, because the minute you go to smaller villages, the offtake is less and the cost of reach is more because they are more distant villages. So there is no viable business model. But 50% of demand comes from the less than 2,000 population villages.
Yes.
So 50% they have tapped, which is 2,000 plus population villages, but the remaining 50% they can't tap because they don't have a business model. But they have to grow their business because they've already saturated urban markets. They've saturated the 2,000 plus villages. So now they have to go to the next level. So that's when they approached us. And we then developed this model where, see, there is no investment from Unilever, because Unilever said we have a cash and carry policy. Okay, so these women will have to pay cash upfront to take their stocks. Okay? And so that was the main thing. So we and the minimum order they would execute will be 20,000 rupees plus. Okay? Now, poor women in rural India will not have 20,000 rupees lying with them. Okay? And that also they have to pay upfront. So that was the reason why we appointed women from microfinance groups, because these women could take a loan from the group money as a loan for themselves and then pay to Unilever and get stocks against cash payment. Okay, and in each woman was given the territory of her own village. She would go door to door, and she would sell these brands. And remember one thing, that all these brands are products that the rural families use regularly. So whether it is tea, or it is soap, or it is shampoo, or it is washing powder, these are things that everybody is using, toothpaste, right? So, so she could actually go and sell, and many women double their family income through this model, because they would get, so they would sell this in their own village and in one or two neighboring villages, which were not far, so which was walking distance.
Right.
And they were able to make about 2,000-3,000 rupees extra income per month for the family, which I'm talking of the year 2000, which was a fair amount of money for them. And as I said, in many cases, the women doubled their income. Now, this was a win-win model for everybody. The women were looking for economic opportunities from that group money. So they have doubled their family income. Unilever was wanting to penetrate the next level of the market. And these groups are all in the smaller villages, because groups are made by the poorer women. And remember one thing, the bigger the village, the higher the per capita income, the higher the prosperity. The smaller the village, the less the per capita income. So that's how this model worked very well. Now, then Colgate came to us, and we said, it won't work with you because you have only one brand. So you need to have a basket of 10, 20 brands, because the share of wallet that you spend on any company's products is based on the number of brands that you buy. Right? So this was a small number. So with Colgate, we had to redo the model, and we had to give and we had to get boys, because we had to give a territory of 20 villages. Because in the case of Lewis, 20 brands and one village, there's enough market. But in Colgate, because it's only one brand, so by unitary method, you need 20 villages. And therefore, we had to get boys, because women don't have social sanction to, go and sell in other villages. and they had to be on bicycle because 20 villages means you have to travel 4-5 kilometers. So does that answer your question?
Yes. So how the idea of Mela came to you? Mela seems to be a very interesting marketing strategy for rural India.
In the 90s, when I came into this sector and I started talking about rural marketing, but everybody said rural marketing is selling agri inputs to farmers. That is rural marketing.
Right.
Or it is selling products made by rural artisans like handicrafts or handlooms to urban centers.
Right.
There was no corporate rural marketing. Okay. And when I was the advisor to the Ministry of Rural Development, I realized that our women and men in rural India make the most exquisite handicrafts and handlooms and products, which you wouldn't get anywhere else in the world.
Right.
But they don't have access to city markets. And all these products are sold in city markets. So whether it's carpets or it's, intricate weaves or all that. So then I started this concept of melas for selling rural products into urban centers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was nothing to do with corporate India then. Yeah. So this was for bringing rural products. As I said, that was the definition of rural marketing then, that selling rural products in urban centers. Right. And since they didn't have an access, so I provided that platform. Yeah. And right. These melas were done in the big cities like Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, then the next level like Kanpur, Lucknow and all that, then the third level like Jamshedpur and all. And in total, we did 300 melas. I never approached the Guinness Book, but I think there's nobody who would have done 300 melas in the world.
Reached them. You would have made the Guinness Book of World Record for this.
So that's where the idea came from. But then when I got into corporate rural marketing, then I said we need to study these. No, it started with the weekly markets, not the melas first. Yeah. And when I crisscrossed the country and I found a lot of these weekly markets on the roadside, and I came back to Delhi and I checked with the Ministry of Rural Development and the Ministry of Agriculture. Nobody had an idea of what these markets are about and how many such markets happen in India. Do they happen in all the states? Right? So I then approached the Secretary, Ministry of Rural Development, and I said, this is a very good opportunity. We should try and find out, and maybe we can tie up with them for selling these women's products, those handlooms, handicrafts and everything through these weekly markets and all, and also food and vegetable and everything. So then I did a study for the Ministry of Rural Development, which was the first of its kind in India. Nobody had ever studied hearts and melas. And I discovered that there are about 25,000 melas that are held in India, of which 2,500 are commercial melas. And the biggest one I saw was in Sonpur, where an elephant sold for 10 lakhs. I mean, I saw that deal. I was there in Sonpur where it was sold for 10 lakhs. So, and they clock turnovers of hundreds of crores, these melas. And today, tractor companies, FMCG companies, all put up stalls there. So it's become a big business. Absolutely. And hearts, of course, that 25% of all consumption in rural India goes through hearts. Oh. And no company was using them. When I talked to levers about it, I won't name the person, but I was told that if this is such a smart idea, somebody should have done it earlier. So,
that's what people talk about it.
That's what
one day somebody has to do it.
And now it was stupid of me to say that, no, I'm a smart guy. I can't say that. But finally, the entire corporate India has used hearts and melas, and I can stand there and take credit for it.
Absolutely. No wonder, sir, that's why you are the father of rural marketing.
But I wasn't then.
You're the godfather of rural marketing.
I wasn't then. I was still learning all these things.
So do you think rural resurgence will fuel India's economic recovery?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we've just touched the tip of the iceberg. The rural has huge potential. Let's start with agriculture. Okay, agriculture, horticulture, just together. We are the only country in the world which has all the agroclimatic regions.
Right.
From very cold Himalayas to the desert to everything. So we can produce anything that grows on this planet.
Yeah.
Okay? We have the highest land area, okay, but we have the lowest productivity. Our land area is the same as China, but our productivity is half of China. So if we can double our productivity, just bring it up to the China level, not the US level, we could be doubling our agriculture. So when the Prime Minister says doubling income for farmers, I feel I can do it. If we just focus on productivity, which means mechanization and, drip irrigation and a whole lot of other things.
Yeah.
So we need to tackle that. So that's the first one. The second one is, I think COVID has taught us that you can do a lot of work from home.
True.
Yeah. So therefore, you can do a lot of things sitting in rural India. You won't believe it. I was in Ranikhet now for 5 weeks, in our cottage, and I told you it's in a village, and I did about 10 webinars from there, like these.
True. Sir,
it didn't make a difference to me whether I was sitting there or sitting here.
Absolutely. So I was working with Jaipur Rugs for a short stint of time. I was taking care of their marketing. And when I joined the company, I think that one of the reasons I joined them because, they had a very interesting model where they were working with these women working from home.
Chaudhary is a very enlightened human being. Yeah.
So, of course, that's like, there's a lot potential that can be done, and very few people are tapping that potential.
Yeah. See, the BPOs, my immediate neighbor cottage, he's running a BPO in Ranikhet, in that area, with women. So a lot of opportunities are there, but it's just that we have a mental block that to do any business or to do any work, I must be in a city because I must have assured internet connectivity. I must have assured electricity. But I didn't even have an internet connection. I was working on a hotspot.
So we find our ways of doing things.
Of course. We are Jugadis. So we'll...
No, interestingly, sir, those, if we talk about the Godrej Chotu Cool or if we talk about the LG small color TV, I think all of them have done those innovations for rural India, taking care of their needs.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Sir, do you think have consumer and status symbol changed in rural India now? And their behavior has changed?
Yes. See, earlier, it used to be a pakka roof. So an RCC roof was a status symbol. Okay? But you'd be really surprised that in just one decade, which is from 2011 to 2021, we still haven't reached that census stage, but since our teams keep traveling, so we know the number of pakka houses has jumped from 33% of total housing stock to 66%. Doubled in one decade. In the last 5 decades, it has not doubled. Okay, so that shows the prosperity. But because now it's become commonplace, everybody's got a pakka house. So that pakka house is no longer the status symbol. Okay? So now for the youth, the status symbol is your model of the mobile phone. And interestingly, the mobile phone has done another great thing. It has given an identity to the young owner. See, earlier, that young man or young boy of 17, 18, whenever he was introduced in the family, it was always a Ramu ka beta hai.
Right.
You see? But today, the guy gets a bill for his mobile phone for a postpaid connection on his name.
Yeah.
So he has suddenly found his identity. And on his mobile phone, he's got his photograph. He doesn't have his father's photograph. So technology is also changing behavior. And, these status symbols.
In fact, I was just reading 2 days back, there's a village near to Jaipur, Manoharpur, more number of Harley Davidson has been sold there than as compared to what it's been happening in Jaipur. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
definitely
absolutely.
that's been changed.
Yeah.
So that's again a positive sentiment that, there's a lot happening into the rural India.
A lot is happening in the rural area and a lot more will happen. See, the other thing that students should realize is that because of the last 50 or 100 years of corporate marketing in India, a lot of it we have borrowed from the West because we didn't have our own marketing models. Yes. So Philip Kotler is a standard book, and we know all the ways that the Americans and Europeans have done their marketing. And our own systems like the Hearts and Melas and all, we have pushed back because we don't have this. But all the innovation and creativity that could be done in urban India, whether it is with the product, whether it is with the distribution system, the last mile thing, or with communications, has been done. Okay? Whereas in rural, I mean, I always say I'm in andhe mein kana. That's what I call myself because nothing has been done in rural India. So whatever I've done has become a global model. So, we became famous because of Project Shakti. But
why people are so hesitant when there's so much potential? Why people are so hesitant going in? Is it because of lack of infrastructure, facilities?
I think I think there are a lot of myths about it and mistaken understanding. The first is that most youngsters feel that if I take up a job in a rural marketing, I'll have to go and live in the village.
Yeah.
Which is nonsense. Nobody lives in a village. You will live in the district headquarters or at least the block headquarters, depending on, so if you're a TSI, a territory sales in charge, and if your territory is a district, for most FMCG companies, the territory is a district. So you will live in the district headquarters. Okay? So even Kanpur is a district, so you live in Kanpur, but you won't go and live in a village. Okay? So that's the first myth. The second myth is that I won't be able to maintain the urban lifestyle because I won't get my kind of products.
Yeah.
Today,
everything is available.
Everything, last year I lost my phone in Ranikhet again. And we went to this local market and the shop selling mobile phones was an exclusive shop with a double front, so 10 feet and 10 feet, 20 feet shop with a deep thing. And I said, koi acha mobile dikhana. So he says, Apple 7 I have, wo dikhaun. Apple 7 in rural India. Okay. And then I looked embarrassed because I wanted to buy something half the price. So everything is available there. So this is a complete thing that things won't be available. Right? And the road connectivity has become so good that you will do up-down because from your district headquarters, you won't have to go more than 20, 30 kilometers into your territory.
Right.
So you will go in the morning, do your rounds and meet the retailers and come back by the evening. And you will live in a decent town. Right? So, and also the other thing is that, with mobile phones and with all kinds of ways to connect, you could be talking to your friends on Zoom.
That's what we've been doing.
That's what we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 months, all of us.
True.
Right? And in fact, I now feel that, I have accepted every invitation for a seminar, for giving a talk in the last 4 or 5 months. Whereas earlier I used to be very choosy for the simple reason that if somebody calls you from, say, Gorakhpur and says, there's a management institute, can you come here? I'll waste 2 days coming and going.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas here I'm sitting with you, and the minute I finish, I'll go for my walk and back. So it's, so this is what youngsters have to realize, that things have changed so dramatically in the last 5 years that there is no hardship living anymore.
True. So though you were talking about there is a role of women which has been changing, but how do you see the role of women in rural India in the coming years?
Okay, the first thing is that women will start choosing their own brands. See, till now what was happening was that even if that woman of the house wanted tea, she would tell her husband ki chai chahiye, chai patti khatam ho rahi hai, manga lena. Right?
So she's become decision maker.
Yeah, but even if she mentioned a brand, Tata Taza manga lena. When the husband went to the shop, the shopkeeper would say Tata ki to nahi. Either he would say Tata ki nahi, or the man would forget which brand did my wife say. So he'll say, acha koi achhi chai de dena, and the shopkeeper would give the tea, and with that he would, put in a comment कि चाय तो चाय है, वो तो भाभी के हाथ की बनाने की बात है, वो बहुत बढ़िया बनाती हैं कोई भी चाय. Right? So that's going to change. Women are going to start exerting their individuality. Yeah. And education has become the big thing. So you find that women are really wanting to study. I mean, this time again, I met some young girls in a school kind of a setting. And I was talking to 2-3 of them, and they're very clear cut what kind of a career they want for themselves. They don't want to get married and settle down. Their whole thing is that I want to become a pilot, I want to become this or what.
Yeah. In fact, so we have 50% of our students in School of Development Studies as girls, and they're coming from various parts of the country.
Yes. And now they're seeing equal opportunity. Yeah. And in a way, technology has become a leveler, between boys and girls also. So, yeah. So I think things have changed a lot.
True. So when you're talking about digitization, do you think in rural India it's pragmatic or it's really optimistic?
I would think that it is pragmatic for the reason that sitting here today, it may seem a little optimistic, but but things change so rapidly. It's like, I must tell you that 12 years back, we were hired by Escotel. That time, this was part of Escorts, and this is the mobile division of Escorts. Yeah. And they asked us to do a study in rural India and identify 5 potential customers for them in every village. So we did the study and we found that the village Pradhan was one, the Atta Chakki wala was another one, the school master was another one. So like that, we identified 5. And now when I look at that report, I mean, 5 in every village, you'll have 500. Everybody has a mobile, So the point that you were saying, that is it realistic? That time 5 seemed realistic, but within a short period of 8-10 years, it's become 500 and 5,000 also, depending on the population of the village. Yeah. See, everybody, if you look at mobile phones, out of this 900 million, about 600 million have mobile phones in rural India. So except for little children and very old people, everybody, men, women, boys, girls, they all have a mobile. So who had imagined this would happen in such a short period?
Yeah, and now
or let's go back for a minute to before digitization also. I want to take the example of Hero MotoCorp and Maruti. Okay, Hero MotoCorp invited me to the board to present the opportunities in rural. This was, I'm talking about 10 years back, 2011. Okay. That time, Mr. Brij Munjal was there, and all of them were there. And they liked the idea, and they told their team that we want to go rural. So start planning for it. So we gave them some consultancy. They were selling 0 motorcycle in rural India till then.
Why so?
Because, they're not put any emphasis on rural. Koi ikka dukka aa gaya to aa gaya. But no planned effort. Today, out of their 6 million motorcycles that they produce a year, they sell 3 million motorcycles in rural India. 50% of their motorcycles in rural India. So if they had not opened the rural market in 2012, which is what they did, they would be nowhere today. Their turnover could be half of what it is today. Same thing with Maruti. Can you imagine a 4-wheeler costing 3 lakhs? Maruti also opened in 2013, the rural market. And today, out of 1.1 million cars that they produce, they sell 400,000 cars in villages of India. So all I want to say about rural is that whatever you think is optimistic will become realistic in a very short time. Absolutely. And believe you me that what we've seen is the tip of the iceberg. The real demand is going to explode in the face of corporate India, because corporate India is still not ready for this demand explosion.
So what are the career opportunities for young students today in rural India?
There are fantastic career opportunities. One, most companies now have a separate rural division. So Hero MotoCorp, Maruti, Unilever and the traditional companies always had it, but I'm talking of even the new comers. Yeah. So you have, Hero MotoCorp has 700 people in the market who are paid partly by the distributor and partly by the company, but they are on the payrolls, 700 of them. Same thing with Maruti. Okay? Right. So there are big numbers getting generated through these. Then you look at Godrej, you look at Imami, you look at Nestle. All the FMCG companies are moving into rural India. Yeah? The same way with TV companies. The rural India now buys more TVs than urban India. Okay? Rural India buys about the same number of refrigerators as urban India because of this breakdown of the joint family system. So there's a lot of demand that's come up. So demand is no longer an issue in rural India. Business models, sustainability of business models is no longer an issue. There is just a mental block amongst companies because they still are living in that doubt. Will we get a share of the market? And young students and young people are again living in this wrong fallacy that rural is all hardship, machhar hoga, kuch kaam karne ko nahi hai, entertainment nahi hai. Who goes out for entertainment in Delhi? We have all the entertainment on the screen now, whether a TV screen or a phone screens or whatever. So as it is, life has changed.
Very true. So may I ask you a question? Like, how many villages you have traveled in India?
I don't remember now. But see, honestly, I stopped traveling in rural India about 5 years back.
Okay.
Because people like Ben and so many people are traveling, But in the initial years, it was not a question of traveling. I spent the first 5 or 6 years of my, rural life when I came into this sector, between 90 and 95, I would have visited hundreds and hundreds of villages then, because I was working with the handicraft people. Okay, giving them designs and doing their pricing, packaging, sitting with them. So my knowledge of rural marketing is entirely bottoms up. As I tell Unilever, I don't know what is FMCG. I never knew it because even in my corporate avatar, I worked with auto ancillary companies. So I was never in the FMCG sector. So I don't know what's a journey plan. I didn't know then. One has learned all that. But my work was mainly with handloom weavers, the handicraft weavers. I was the chairman of the Khadi Commission marketing. So all my knowledge of rural is by living and spending time with the rural people and understanding their problems, their issues, right? And that's why I feel that my knowledge is far, far superior because it's not surface knowledge. And it's not bookish knowledge. I mean, even if you pick up the book, it's mostly practical. Because in any case, I don't know theory. I've never been to a business school.
Yeah. So one message is very loud and clear that, one has to be in field, understand the sentiments of the people. If you want to plan and devise strategies.
If you don't understand your consumer, how can you be a successful marketer? But understanding the urban consumer is easy because he's like me.
Yeah.
He's like you. He's like all of us.
Right.
But the rural consumer, we don't understand because we don't know Kisan hai, Gawar hai, kya hai, ye kaun hai. So therefore we have to understand it. Right? And just to give you a very small example, I was traveling, since you're from Rajasthan, I'm working in Rajasthan, I was traveling to Jaisalmer to work with a handicraft small group, three women who were doing some embroidery work. And this was my first trip there. We landed there with the NGO, and it was 27th of May, 47 degrees outside. And when we arrived there, this woman brought a lota of pani, water, and I sprinkled the water all over my face generously, and I finished the water. And this NGO worker later on said to me, says, "Sir, आपने उनका पूरे दिन का पीने का पानी पीने का कोटा आपने अपने मुंह पे छिड़क दिया." So I was so upset with myself that, I don't even have this basic knowledge about these people. And when I saw their homes in Jaisalmer, you won't believe it, they pull out only one brick. That is their window. That one brick is the window. Because if they make a window, itna dust storms hote hain ki inside will become a sand dune. Right? And in that light, they do that fine embroidery. Because if they sit outside, they will get sand in their mouth. So they have to sit inside the room, and there is no bijli because it's all in the desert. So when you experience these things, I think this is what sensitized me to the reality and the challenges that rural people face. And that made my resolve stronger that I must do something. And I also realized that marketing their products is far more difficult than marketing corporate products. I had marketed corporate products all my life. It's cakewalk. I can close my eyes and do it. So simple. But tackling poverty and, working with people who are living under such difficult conditions, that's a huge challenge. But it gives you so much satisfaction. So the message I want to give to students is that there is tremendous satisfaction at the end of it.
Absolutely. So you've traveled to the length and breadth of the villages in India. Do you think students who've never been to villages can just work there with their intent?
I had never been to a village in all my life till I came into this sector. Because I was born in Delhi, I lived in Delhi, I started in Delhi and then with Pilani, and then started working in a multinational company in Calcutta and Delhi, never been to a village. And that's why when I came into the sector, for the first 2 years, I only traveled the length and breadth of the country. I didn't open my mouth. I just kept listening to people. I didn't say anything because I had nothing to say. I had no knowledge. So it does take time. It's like if you go to the US and start working there, you'll have to understand the systems there and the consumer there. So the same is true of your students. If they've never been to a village, but they have to sell to the villagers, then they have to go there and understand what their lifestyles are, what their aspirations are, what their purchasing power is, how important are relationships, how important is community decision-making. There are so many factors. No?
So do you think is rural soon to become the next urban?
I don't like that because why should we compare ourselves to urban? Rural is king.
That's what people keep talking about it.
Yeah. So, I
urban, urban, semi-urban.
The point simply is that when I wrote the first edition of my book, I kept comparing rural with urban.
Okay.
And then I realized my mistake that why should I be comparing? Rural is rural, urban is urban. Yeah. And today, already, the rural market contributes more to the GDP. The rural production, that means the SME sector, the small and medium enterprise sector, rural contributes more. Do you know there are more graduates in rural India than in urban India? We keep saying rural mein log padhe likhe nahi hai, but the number of graduates is more in rural India than in urban India. Yeah? And so I think rural will outgrow urban in terms of demand, in terms of opportunities, in terms of challenges.
True. So can I take a few questions of audience as well?
Sure.
One of them is asking, how could Patanjali, leverage itself into the rural India? Why other FMCG brands could not done to that extent?
Patanjali has leveraged itself more in urban markets, not in rural markets. In fact, their distribution is quite poor in rural markets because the kind of products that Patanjali is making, many of them are based on grandmother's remedies. Right? So rural people are already using these remedies.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to buy just because now it's become a brand. Yeah? But it's the urban people. So what he has done is he has brought in this whole tradition of Ayurveda and herbal into the mindset of urban people. And that's why companies like Unilever and Colgate and all followed suit with their, toothpaste with Ayurvedic inputs. So Patanjali is really an urban market phenomenon, not a rural market phenomenon.
So another question is that, do you think it's difficult to win the trust of the people in rural India?
Oh, absolutely. Because rural people have been cheated again and again in the past when they didn't have, high levels of literacy. So they view urban people with suspicion. And they also feel a little inferior because they feel ये अंग्रेजी पढ़े हुए हैं, ये पूरे दुनिया में घूमे हुए हैं, right? So the first thing that any company has to do is not sell its products, but to build trust. And the best example of this is the Tata Group. Yeah? Tata has done so much for rural India, by putting up bus stops, a whole lot of infrastructure support in rural, right? And only after that they started selling their brand, by which time they had already created that equity for their brand and that trust. So what people say now is, कि अगर Tata की pipe है तो we don't have to ask, we'll just buy. Because Tata has done that. And also the fact that Tata spends a lot of money on education, on healthcare, cancer, social development, and all these things. So people say Tata हमारे फायदे के लिए company है, because वो हमेशा हमारा सोचती है. But when multinationals come and they say, oh, there's a 200 million middle class in rural India, let's go grab them. Then they close their pockets because they say these people have come to rip us off.
Another question is that a lot of people have lost their jobs during this COVID period, during the lockdown. So how to help them with an employment opportunities? Some of them are asking about
it. The future of employment in this country is going to be self-employment and not job employment. So, and I think if you look at youngsters coming out of the IITs and BITS and all that, they're all talking about startups.
Absolutely.
Hardly anybody is talking that I'm looking for a job in Unilever or in Deloitte, or they're all now talking about self-employment because the country cannot absorb any more jobs. Already, there are far too many people in the government. There are too many people in farming. So, youngsters, even in your campuses, will have to start seriously thinking and looking at self-employment. And that too, if they can do it from a rural location, nothing like it.
One last question about health-seeking behavior. Do you think the health-seeking behavior has also changed?
Companies like Unilever spend millions on hand wash programs, but haven't met with much success. Even now, I think once this COVID fear is gone, more and more people will slip back to their old habits in terms of hand wash. I'm talking of specific health-seeking behavior.
I remember that Life Boys campaign, which became so popular, which they did with Kumbh Mela.
Yeah, at the Kumbh Mela, so they used to have this,
Chapati
chemical,
campaign.
and then chapati was in the second, the second time, but the first time they were actually showing that germs remain on your hands, by doing an infrared this thing.
Yeah.
But this Unilever has been doing this campaign for years.
Yes.
In fact, my son was the senior brand manager for Lifebuoy. Some years, so he used to keep telling me. So this kind of behavior, once the fear and the threat is over, human behavior responds to threat. So we create certain secure zones around ourselves. So in this case, it was through a hand wash. Once the threat is gone, I think most people, especially rural people, will return to not washing their hands. But I think things like immunity, if you're talking of health-seeking behavior, I think immunity will become an important issue, or will remain an important issue. So things like Chyawanprash and all will continue to do well.
So one of them is also asking that every corporate is now shifting towards work from home. How they are shifting in changing their marketing and sales strategies for rural India?
I think this is early days, because right now companies are only realizing, this work from home concept had started much before COVID. Okay? So that's the larger point I wanted to make first, that behavior which had started to change before COVID has better chances of continuing to change after COVID also. Right? So work from home, right now it's become a necessity because of COVID, but more and more companies are realizing that yes, we can work from home. And in fact, even at MART, we were resisting it, but now since we have gone to this work from home, we are finding that the productivity is much better. Yeah, it is much better. So what we have done now is that everybody comes only once a week, for any group meeting or those sort of things. But otherwise, people are working from home, and they're working very, very comfortably, because you have Zoom and Google Meet and MS Team and all that. Yeah, all these EE platforms. So I think that will work. A more hybrid model will evolve finally. Right?
So when is the next book releasing?
We have completed 8 chapters out of 13. So we still, we are trying to target the July session.
June, July. So next academic year, probably we're going to have.
Because it'll take us another 2-3 months to finish it, and then it'll go to the editor, proofreading, and then designing, and then all the layouts and all that. And then you have to give a 2-month lead period for printing, and then distribution, and it must reach the colleges, or it must reach the distributors. So we are targeting July.
Thank you so much, sir, for a very, very interactive and inspiring talk. I can see the chat box is flooding with lots and lots of questions. And I was equally thrilled and excited to hear you. And I was all remembering all the examples and all that I've been reading in the books. It was really, really very exciting to listen to you. And I would love to keep asking questions. I would like to.
You can send those questions later also.
I'll do that, so certainly.
Yeah, and I must say that I enjoyed myself thoroughly. And
pleasure is all mine.
And you were a very good moderator, because you could ask the right questions. So actually that helps a lot, because if you ask the right questions, you normally get the right answers.
Did I really? I thought I was like kind of lost in what you're talking, and I forgot to ask my next set of questions. But anytime anything our students or I can, personally contribute in terms of doing some research or, contributing in form of some examples or writing, I think so we'll be glad to join hands with you and do something.
No, we'll be very happy. We've been having a lot of interaction with academic institutions for the last 15,
Please, sir,
20
keep
years.
us now in your mailing list.
Yeah, sure.
We shall be more than happy. I mean, I'm sure my students would be more than interested to join hands.
Wherever we can work together, we'll certainly keep that in mind. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure hearing you this evening. And thank you for being so gracious and giving your time.
Not at all, Sheenu. So you take care and thank all the students for sitting patiently and listening.
Thank you so much, sir. Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Thank you everyone for joining this evening. Goodbye. We'll see you once again soon.